Welcome into, and thanks so much for joining us here on Aspire to Retire with Ralph and Tim Short, the financial advisors and the father-son team behind Welcome Home Financial Partners. You can find out more about them, the entire team, set up a time to speak with them over there on the website, welcomehomefp.com. You can also give a call, have a complimentary conversation, drop into one of their 3 offices in the Richmond location, and start that process, that retirement roadmap process. That number is 804-635-3550. Once again, 804-635-3550. My name is Chris Swan. I'm pleased to be joined, as I always am, with Ralph and Tim Short. Gentlemen, it's good to see you once again. How you doing today?
We're doing well, sir. How about yourself?
Doing well. I appreciate you asking that. The school year is getting ready to wind down. Summer is going to be upon us. I'm making plans for my son and the things that he's going to do. And of course, that doesn't come cheaply. Retirement is a lot of summer. Every day is summer. Every day is Saturday. And so how are you going to fill that time? How are you going to pay for that time? That's what we're here to discuss. And it actually leads in one of the biggest hurdles for people during retirement. It's not saving enough. It's trusting that they can actually use what they've saved, the freedom to spend it. Financial author Bonnie Treichel tells Morningstar that she compares it to layers of an income cake.
Helping people think about, at least I've got these couple of layers of my cake that create some certainty for me. A little bit of Social Security, a little bit of that annuity component in a retirement plan or otherwise. It does provide some safety and security to be able to feel like, okay, at least I know I'm going to have this much and I'm going to be okay. And it creates that permission to spend. And I think that can really be useful for folks when they start to think about, it's going to be okay to retire. It's going to be okay to spend a little bit.
Now, I did not intend to start the show off with a food conversation. That is what she said. But I do think there's still confusion out there that annuities, they are an all or nothing sort of decision. How do you help people understand they're often not the entirety of the plan, or they shouldn't be the entirety of the plan, but a piece of a plan?
Well, it's funny because, there's a lot of annuities out there that people get with the Social Security and, some of us I shouldn't say us, some people hitting the lottery and, pension plans and that type of deal. And you don't ever see anybody complain about that. And, hey, I'm going to give that back or this isn't going to work for me, right? So I think, the way that we explain annuities, it's not the end all be all and not everybody needs an annuity, but, it's not all or nothing. And you don't ever want, whether it's an annuity, whether it's a mutual fund, whether it's a stock, doesn't matter. It shouldn't be all or nothing, right? So we should have things spread out. And if we want to layer it in as a cake or whatever, I think it's really good to use because we can have some additional guaranteed income. I think that's kind of having like a pension, but a bigger income plan. And, rates have been strong as of late, and it still pays to shop because features and guarantees can be different amongst, every annuity. And that's where, and I know Dad would probably say the same thing is, if we talk to folks about annuities and it's not for everybody, but there's specific reasons why, and that's based off their individual situation or what they're looking for, or what their goals are. And, if you want some protection or you want some guaranteed income, that's a really good place to be. While you're working, things look a little bit different, but when you're in retirement, I don't think anybody complains about having more money coming in or more checks coming to them. And if they do, we want to know why they're complaining about that, right? So I think a lot of folks, they don't necessarily I should say that they aren't very familiar with them because they're not currently using them. Everybody gets comfortable with where their strategies or lack thereof are because they know what to expect. They know what they've done, right? They've seen their performance where it's, okay, if we're going to start shifting monies around from this 401k to, an IRA, maybe using an annuity for some of that or using different types of investment vehicles, they're kind of uncomfortable because they haven't been a part of that yet. So, when it comes down to retirement income planning, annuities usually are a really good place for some of the funds, but you don't want all of your money doing the same thing at all times. So, I think an annuity is going to be built different and not everybody, once again, is going to need them, but you can't look at one annuity and the next annuity and think that they're going to be the same because it's just like going out and buying a car, right? Most people don't buy a car without test driving it because they start to feel a little comfortable with it. So, it's important to realize that not one thing, one vehicle, one investment vehicle is going to be the same. So it could have a piece of your retirement plan. It could not. But without knowing how it works or if it's right for you, then why are you going to pass judgment there?
And I would say to most people, when we start talking to people about income planning, we try to let them understand that now you're in charge of your own paycheck. Through our retirement roadmap process, we talk about that. You have to figure out a way to have that paycheck not stop, because your bill's not going to stop when you're in retirement. But I think most people struggle to visualize what their retirement is going to look like, because they've been told all their working life, all you got to do is save money, and put in your 401k and you'll be fine. But nobody ever talks to you about, okay, now that you've accumulated this money, how are you going to get it back to you in the most tax efficient way that you can? And that's where a lot of people miss the boat, in my opinion. But the other thing that people are a little worried about is we don't know if the money's going to last you, because how long are you going to live?
Right.
Nobody ever knows that. Nobody can tell me that. Even you, Chris, I know that you are one of the smartest men in the room, but you can't tell me how long you're going to be around. If people could do that, I could tell them real quick how much to spend every month.
Right.
But guess what? None of us knows that. And I think a lot of people think that retirement planning, your retirement, is a straight line when you start thinking about it. Guess what? If you needed $1,000 or $2,000 a month to live your lifestyle that you have right now, that would be great. But guess what? 10 years from now, you might need $3,000 a month. So it's always going to change based on your circumstances, based on the economy, based on the inflation, based on what you've accumulated and how things are going. So you just can't say this is how it's going to be. It's locked in stone. Now, a lot of people, when they start thinking about annuities, that's what they think about it. There are annuities out there that is set in stone and you can't make any changes, but that's not things that we kind of talk to people about. There are situations where it's good for you, but guess what, Chris? I don't know about you, and I think the listeners would agree with me. I like control of my money. I like to say, hey, this is how much money I need today, and then I can change it a year from today or whatever it is. That's the biggest issue that people has misunderstood about annuities. Why? Because everything they listen to on TV or they listen to some type of advertisements, you don't ever want to buy one. Well, why is that? Do they know what you're trying to do when they say that? Probably not. They don't know anything about you. They just say, hey, this is what you shouldn't do, mainly because I don't do it. This is what I do so I can get paid. So those are all things that I would talk to people about. And also, you cannot rely on rules of thumb when you're planning for your retirement. It's got to be about you. It's got to be about what your expenses are, the way you want to live. There are some people that want to spend $20,000 a month on vacations, or there's some that don't want to spend anything. So anything that we recommend is based on that personal interaction that we have with customers.
Longtime listeners of the show and even recent listeners of the show will know that you guys never give specific advice that is across the board for everyone, because it's not true for everyone out there. And as fiduciaries acting in the client's best interest, if you don't believe that something is going to work, like an annuity in their situation, you are not going to present that to them. But if you believe that it could be a valuable part, you're going to present that information to them and then let them make an informed decision at the end of the day. But you guys are right. Your spending is probably not going to be static throughout your retirement. I mentioned summer vacation coming up. I could figure out about how much we're going to spend every week, but I also know that there's a trip to Chicago in there. And you know what? I'm going to be spending a lot more there than I am hopefully any other time of the week, but knowing that it's going to fluctuate and things like that. But if your monthly expenditures at the end of the day, the things that are consistent are covered by consistent, reliable sources of income, it can go a long way to addressing that concern of outliving your savings. And it's all part of that retirement roadmap process. That begins by giving a call, setting up a time to speak with the team at Welcome Home Financial Partners, Ralph Short, Tim Short. It's 804-635-3550. Or you can set up a time on the website as well, welcomehomefp.com. We're actually going to continue the food conversation for a second. What do some restaurants do with their leftover food at the end of the day? Chick-fil-A, Olive Garden, Starbucks, Pizza Hut, they actually donate it to local nonprofits, food banks, and shelters. So their surplus does not become waste. It becomes a legacy. And really, that's the goal of estate planning, right? Deciding where everything goes ahead of time. So when you guys sit down with somebody, what are the most common leftovers that you find? The old 401ks or life insurance account spread everywhere? And how do you help make sure that they end up in the right hands and, not Uncle Sam's hands?
Yeah, I think the most common thing that we see is having those old accounts, right? There's a lot of people nowadays that work for a few different places, maybe not at the same time, but the next thing you know, they've accumulated 6 different 401ks and they've never paid attention to them. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know what the amounts are. Hell, half the time they forgot where they are, right? They think that they can come in and say, hey, I know I've got 5 old accounts. Can you help me find them? Well, that can be rather difficult. So if you're not tracking them on your own, it might make our job a little bit more difficult. But yeah, you want to make sure that you've got clarity with your accounts. And if things are just kind of hanging out there and you're not paying attention, not knowing what's going on, well, I think that's where we come in, is we help consolidate and organize everything so it's clear and coordinated, and you don't necessarily have to be so worried about it. But also, too, you got to realize is that, if you've got 5 or 6 different old accounts, odds are the beneficiaries on those accounts aren't aligned with what you want. And that's going to be a huge issue, because I can tell you that, we've seen it before. People forgot about an old account, and next thing you know, something happens and it went to an ex-spouse, or it was supposed to go to their parents, but their parents are long gone too. So you don't want the state to get in charge, because we know how that ends.
Right.
It's not well, right? That's that stale sofa pizza you don't want to put into your mouth, right? So sorry, we had to bring it back to the food conversation there, Chris. You're welcome.
Thanks.
But yeah, I think it is very easy to have life get in the way. I think we can all say that to a point. But, as you're going through your career, you've got to make sure that you set aside time to, come up with these plans. And that's one of the biggest questions that we hear a lot is, oh, I just changed jobs, so I take my old 401k and roll it into my new one. Well, sure, you can, but what's the strategy there? Is it just combining the accounts? Because there's other things that you can do. One of the problems with doing that is now you kind of lost control of that money, and you can't control really how it's invested, because you've got a list of 10, 12, 15, maybe 20 different options in the 401k. But if you wanted to invest into, we'll bring it back to the A word, to an annuity, you can't do it, right? More than likely, you're not going to be able probably to get cryptocurrency if you want to do that. Now, those are kind of polar opposites, right? We're talking about the annuity, and now we're talking about cryptocurrency. But, I think that's why it's important to, before you make that decision, is, get the pros and the cons, because once you start rolling things into current employer accounts, you might end up running out of control. And I don't think a lot of people want to do that with their money.
And I think the number of accounts that you have is a lot harder to manage. It's a lot harder to think about tax opportunities that you might have missed because you didn't know where this was or that was. Let's say that you had an RMD and it was still in an account that was 30 years ago and you forgot about it and you didn't take it out. Well, guess what? You might be penalized 25% of what that RMD was because you didn't take it out because you forgot about it. Not that you did anything wrong. It's just that it's harder to manage. And I would say this is number one for most people is it creates, and maybe you don't find this, it alleviates a lot of headaches for your family if you're no longer here, if you only have it in one or two, but maybe you just want to get back at them and say, I want 25 different accounts that they have to figure out where it's coming from. You just never know what people are thinking of at that point in time. But, let's keep your life as financially simple as you can so you know where your money is so that somebody else doesn't grab it.
When you guys,
that conversation is a little bit tougher than the food conversation, right? But it is important to make it easy because, we talk about the beneficiaries, but you also have to think too that 401ks change quite a bit. Mm-hmm. Some funds can go away and some funds could be additional or what have you. Well, if you had all of your money into let's just say it was a target dated fund of 2030, and then they got rid of that, and then they automatically just put you into the stable value fund because that fund is no longer around. Now your money is really just sitting there hanging out, not doing anything. So if you say that was 10 years ago, you missed out on 10 years of opportunity.
And, on one hand, the money wasn't subject to market losses, but the buying power of it decreases. And the saying, out of sight, out of mind, out of money, sometimes when it comes to taxation or fees and things like that. So at least knowing where everything is and then addressing it as part of the overall plan. When you guys do the annual reviews with people, how often do they mention something in passing, catching up with them? What's new? Oh, new grandkid, new spouse, things of that nature. And then you immediately go, well, let's go ahead and reassess these. Does that happen often, or does it? Do they usually bring that to the table themselves?
Oh, yeah, it happens quite a bit, but that's why we like to talk to them more than just one time a year.
Okay.
And, whether it's coming out to the events, which we just had our event a week or so ago. I can't recall. Timelines get to be a little bit crazy, but we just went to the new CarMax Park, which was phenomenal, by the way. So the new Flying Squirrels baseball stadium here in Richmond, it was a great time. But that's a good time to catch up. And granted, we don't talk a whole lot of work at these functions because they're meant to be fun and enjoyable and appreciative and so on. But a lot of times we'll hear, hey, guess what? I just had, my third grandchild, or hey, here's my new spouse or whatever. And these are really good conversations to have so we can make sure everything's lined up. Because that is and we've seen it time and time again, where people have old spouses. That's probably not the right terminology, but ex-spouses or former spouses or whatever. And then it's like, okay, now what? We want to make sure we get this corrected before something happens, because these are tough conversations to have, but guess what? That's one of 3 guarantees of life. We're all going to die at some point. So that's why it's very important. But we talk about it quite a bit is, if somebody becomes a new client, I often say, hey, you do have duties for us. And they kind of look at us like they're crazy, because it's like, well, what do you mean? I just hired you. And it's like, you got to keep us up to speed. I don't live with you, right? I don't know what's going on day in and day out. And I can tell you, if it's a annual review or a quarterly review or a semi-annual review or whatever, things happen, whether it's once a quarter, once every 6 months, or once a year. So that's why everybody's got to have that communication flow.
Again, you can actually find out more about those upcoming events over on the website, welcomehomefp.com. You can also set up a time to speak with them, with Ralph and Tim Short, over there on the website. Or you can give a call right now, 804-635-3550. But when we talk about to, through, and beyond retirement, we are talking about the estate legacy planning. Don't make Uncle Sam or the state a bigger beneficiary of your hard-earned work as the necessary. Set up a time to speak with the team, 804-635-3550. Now, when a ceasefire was announced in the Iran conflict, Wall Street cheered. Stocks jumped, oil prices pulled back, and the market, it clearly liked what it heard. But economist Stephanie Pomboy tells Fox Business the reason leaders are in such a rush to wrap this up has less to do with the markets and more to do with Main Street.
It's a big gamble at a time when they were just starting to get some traction on the affordability argument in terms of slightly lower mortgage rates, lower gasoline prices. It's all completely reversed. I have this sort of my measure, the misery index, that looks at mortgage rates plus retail gasoline prices. It's back to where it was at the peak of the global financial crisis before the Great Recession. So it's a really big drag on consumers. So I think that is the motivating factor behind tying this up as rapidly as they possibly can.
A misery index sounds like a real fun thing to keep tabs of. Are you guys getting a flood of calls from clients that are concerned about the war? And if not, do you think it's because they know that there's a plan in place and it's part of that plan?
Chris, I was thinking the exact same thing. The misery it sounds great, right?
Yeah.
And, and then, of course, they start talking about the financial crisis. And I think a lot of people start using the 2008 headlines to drum up some uncertainty or emotional decisions, knee-jerk reactions, whatever you want to call it. But what we saw last week was pretty wild, and everything, I shouldn't say everything, but there's a lot of things that are driven by headlines. But I think, we don't get a flood of calls, and that's a good sign because most of our clients trust the plan that we put together for them. When volatility hits, we remind them of the strategy that we use, and that's what it's built for, right? So if things get crazy, if oil spikes, if gasoline goes up, diesel costs, all these other things, we don't necessarily have to be concerned or worried about it. Now, when it comes down to your plan, sure. Now, if it's other things that you're getting worried about of, is somebody going to shoot a rocket over here or whatever, if you're worried about safety, that's a different conversation.
Sure.
But when it comes down to your plan, that once again, this is why we do the strategies that we do. And that's why, once again, we get closer to retirement being in retirement. I don't know of anybody that I've come across yet that knew that the Iran conflict was going to start. Now, they might say they did now, but they didn't know beforehand. And that's a lot of these commentators on some of the national markets are saying the same thing, right? Everybody wants to be the next person to call it before it happens. And that's why you'll see a wide range. Oh, hey, best bull run market we're going to see in the next 10 years to, oh my gosh, we're going to have something worse than a recession. Because they want to be the first one to call it. And that's, they're trying to move the needle. They're trying to produce headlines. And at the end of the day, that's why you control what you can. And those are the decisions that you make with your money, because we can't control the market, right? I don't think anybody claims that they can control the market. Well, there's probably a couple people that'll say that, but we won't dive into that rabbit hole at the time. But once again, I think it's very important to make sure we've got things working the way that we do.
And I would say to anybody listening, they should, if you're nearing retirement, this is not the time to guess what is going to happen. You need to have a plan that can handle the uncertainties of life, because guess what? Nobody knows what's going to happen, just like what Tim said. It's just that you've got to be prepared for it.
Over the course of a retirement, 15, 20, 30 years, there's going to be multiple fluctuations. The market is going to have its ebbs and flows in there. And the reasoning you may not be able to predict, but knowing that the market will fluctuate and then accounting for that, saying, hey, when the market is underperforming, we're not pulling from these accounts. We're doing X, Y, and Z. That is part of that planning process. And I think it speaks, to your credit about the calls that you guys aren't getting from clients that are worried about it. Not necessarily the geopolitical part, but just knowing that, this is part of the cycle. That you guys are built for this. So if you've been concerned from a financial standpoint when it comes to what the market has been doing or not doing, maybe it's time to reassess your plan. The team at Welcome Home Financial Partners is happy to give you that second opinion, complimentary second opinion, or a first opinion. If you don't really have a plan put in place, it's as easy as reaching out, going to the website, welcomehomefp.com, or you can give a call, 804-635-3550. So let's play a fun game. Imagine right now that you had $5,000 to spend on your retirement. What would you do? Well, GoBankingRates.com. They had a couple suggestions. Spend it on an experience in retirement, have fun. Spend it on healthcare, including long-term care, pay off debts, invest in personal knowledge, invest in low-cost index funds, put it in a revocable trust. Gentlemen, what do you think of this list? If somebody came to you with this, is there anything that you would add to it?
Well, if you came to me with this list, I know you'd say food would be number one.
Yeah, absolutely. I could buy a lot of pizza and things.
Yeah, I think, a lot of people that we meet, everybody's got a little bit of a different priority, right? Different goals, different things that they want to do. I think it comes down to age is really going to kind of determine the answers too. If you're 20 years old, your answers to this question would be a little bit different than somebody who's 60.
Sure.
Right. I think all in all, there's going to be some similarities. I mean, you want to spend it on things that you love to do. I think this is where, you kind of get to the point of we don't need stuff anymore. Let's start building those memories, those experiences, that type of thing. But I think it's important that, yes, we need to set aside a good budget to do the fun things, but we also have to have a budget for the not so fun things. So once again, when it comes down to like long-term care, that's definitely something to pay attention to. But one of the biggest questions that Dad and I get when we meet with new prospects is they want to know if they need to pay their house off.
Right.
So that's a conversation to have, right? I mean, I think everybody raised their hand to say that they want zero debt. But on the same side is the cash flow the issue for your debt? Or is it bad spending habits? Or is this you just not being diligent or have enough willpower to say no? I think, overall, a lot of things are going to kind of determine the outcome of that list. But it's important because we have this conversation all the time. Chris, you have no idea how many people are out there that have no idea what they're spending money on month to month. And that's what the problem's going to be. And a lot of people don't want to take the time to track what their expenses are, right? And it's not just utilities, it's not just the cell phone, streaming services, and what have you. It's also going to be taking that weekend getaway trip or planning that week-long cruise. All that's going to come into play. So once again, you need to make sure that you've got a good idea as far as what you're spending, because without having a good idea of what you're spending, it's very difficult to make your retirement income plan. And what you don't want to do is fly by the seat of your pants and you get into retirement thinking that all of your investments are fine and we're going to do the 4% rule. And next thing you know, in 2 years, you're going back to work because the market's been down for 2 years. So, you want to make sure that you've got that priority list, if you will, but make sure that you're being very realistic as far as what those look like.
I am very surprised at you, Tim. You didn't use your favorite list, the Amazon list expenses.
I beat up on Amazon. I'm going to give them a pass today.
All right. But no, like you say, it's the biggest thing. What do you want to do with it?
Mm-hmm.
You have to determine that, not us. Yes, I would say number one thing is if you've got a high credit card debt, that would be the first thing I would tackle with it because it pays dividends in the long run. Is it a mortgage? Probably not, but if you're paying 25 to 30% on a $25,000 or $30,000 credit card debt, you'd be a whole lot better off spending that $5,000 to get that down instead of your 5 or 6% on your mortgage. But everybody's a little different. If you're 25 or 30 years old, you probably need to be putting it into, if you can't afford the maximum on your 401k, then you probably need to do that. Or if you're a young family member, maybe you should take that $5,000 and start spending some of it maybe on a life insurance to protect your loved ones in case you're no longer here, particularly if you're a high-wage earner. So those are all things I would say I would add to the list.
Let's be honest, if you're 25 to 30 and you come into $5,000, that money's probably spent before they come in and speak with you guys. They've probably already found a way to do that. Everyone's situation is going to be different. And again, as fiduciaries, Ralph and Tim Short, they will advise you. They say, I think this would work in your favor. They're not going to tell you what to do with that money. Ultimately, that's up to you. You know, if you're looking for permission rather than the options, I mean, you know, they'll present those options, let you make that decision at the end of the day. But again, a couple things to think about there. The debt is a huge thing. As long as it makes sense, paying off your mortgage, if withdrawing money from a 401k, things like that to pay off your mortgage could be counterintuitive. But when it comes to the retirement planning as a whole, again, the fiduciaries at Welcome Home Financial Partners, Ralph Short, Tim Short, they're here for you to give you that advice. Feel free to come into one of their 3 offices in Richmond. Give a call, 804-635-3550, 804-635-3550, or you can go to the website, and that is at welcomehomefp.com. I want to thank you so much for joining us here on Aspire to Retire with Ralph and Tim Short. Really do appreciate you taking the time out of the weekend to spend with us. Hope you have a great week ahead of you. Stay safe out there. Gentlemen, always appreciate the time. I am probably going to go get a piece of cake after this. You're more than welcome to join me. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with the final word.
Go get you that bite of that annuity.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we talk about it all the time, is building that retirement roadmap, helping you visualize what retirement will look like. But it kind of starts with you, right? It starts with figuring out what you need, what you want, the things that you want to do. Chris, Dad will say the same thing, is there's a lot of people that have just worked so hard and never really thought about what's next. And, you know, granted, we can help. We can give you some ideas and some hobbies and what have you, but ultimately that's going to be left up to you. But, you know, I think doing the complimentary retirement roadmap, for a lot of people, have done a really good job with saving, you know, sitting down with them one-on-one in the office, kind of putting pen to paper and figuring out where they want to be. And once again, I think, you know, the clarity of having, you know, where your paychecks are going to come from. So you don't necessarily have to worry about waiting by the mailbox for Social Security or, you know, that type of thing. So once again, we want to thank everybody for listening, and we'd offer that retirement roadmap to you complimentary. But everybody, once again, thank you for listening, and take care.
All content is for information purposes only. It is not intended to provide any tax or legal advice or provide the basis for any financial decision, nor is it intended to be a projection of current or future performance or indication or future results. Opinions expressed herein are solely those of Welcome Home Financial Partners and Welcome Home Wealth Advisors, LLC. The information contained in this material has been derived from sources believed to be reliable, but is not guaranteed as to accuracy and completeness, and does not purport to a complete analysis of the materials discussed. All information and ideas should be discussed in detail with your individual advisor prior to the implementation. Each individual investor's situation is different, and any ideas provided may not be appropriate for your particular circumstance. Advisor services are offered by Welcome Home Wealth Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor in the state of Virginia. Being registered as an investment advisor does not imply a certain level of skill or training. Insurance products and services are offered through WPI Holding, Virginia Insurance License Number 138509, an affiliated company. The information contained herein should in no way be construed or interpreted as a solicitation to sell or offer to sell advisory services to any residents of any state other than the state of Virginia or where otherwise legally permitted. Welcome Home Wealth Advisors, LLC and Welcome Home Financial Partners are not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any government agency.